Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Monday, November 10th, 2025. Alastair Crooke will be here with us in just a minute on MAGA versus the deep state. But first, this. History tells us every market eventually falls. Currencies collapse. And look at where we are now. 37 trillion in national debt. Stocks at record highs defying gravity. So what happens next? Groceries, gas, housing, everything's going up. And this dollar, it buys less every day. When the system breaks, your stocks won't save you and your dollars won't either. But one thing will: gold. I've said it on my show for years. Gold survives collapse. Central bankers know this and billionaires know it. That's why they're buying more. Is it too late to buy, or is it just the right time? Call my friends at Lear Capital to find out. Ask questions, get the free information. There's no pressure, and that's why I buy my gold and silver from Lear. And right now, you can get up to $20,000 in bonus metals with a qualified purchase. Call 800-511-4620 or go to LearJudgeNap.com today. Alastair, welcome here, my dear friend. You've just written a fascinating piece from your perch in Europe analyzing. It's one of the best analyses I've seen of the recent elections in America. It was just local elections, New Jersey, Virginia, New York City, but the results were clear and unmistakable, and in some cases even profound. MAGA is split. It is divided along pro-Zionist, not pro-Zionist lines. The deep state, of course, wants the president to keep being pro-Zionist and pro-Ukraine. How are you reading this? What's your finger on the pulse telling you?
I think although MAGA is at the forefront of it, and MAGA is deeply angry, particularly about the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and what they see, rightly or wrongly, as the cover-up by the FBI of who was responsible for the killing, and they then turn to so they hold Kash Patel as essentially responsible for this cover-up, and are deeply angry about this, and align it with previous grievance about the lack of transparency about Epstein. And that also is seen as a form of, if you like, cover-up. But what is important here, although you rightly call it about MAGA and what's happened in MAGA, but it is really the whole demographic of the young 20s to 35 that see very little future, and they are getting increasingly radical and increasingly irritated at the lack of prospects for them. And you can see this very dramatically in the job prospects. I put in that article about a chart, and the chart shows that whilst markets have been growing 70%, the S&P index going up and the stock market soaring and people making masses of money, what you have is 30% of job losses. And the graph goes that way, if you like, for market, almost exponentially up, and then down for job openings. And it's particularly the 25 to 35-year-old that are suffering these job openings. And they don't see a solution. They don't see any solution. They don't think that just, what has been announced over the weekend, that mortgages can be for 50 years, that we're going to go back to the COVID type of stimulus checks. All of this, is not going to solve the problem. What they want is someone to really produce an answer to this bifurcated economy. You have not one economy in America, and I'm saying this about America, but it applies exactly to Europe, to France, to Britain. All of these countries, it's a Western problem, not just an American problem, that there is a structural divide in societies. So you have a sort of cornucopia of material wealth flowing out of the financialized sector to one part, a very small part, 10%, if you like, of the electorate. And then you have at the other end, increasingly facing debt problems, price increases. There is a really, both in America but in Europe too. I mean, there is a consumption crisis, a consumer crisis, even amongst, not just middle end or higher end restaurants, the cheap end, the sort of burger end of restaurants and takeaway foods are facing a collapse of consumer confidence. And so you've got a bifurcation of the economy, and they don't meet. And the only solution to this is to provide whatever party can offer the bread and butter answer to what young people want: housing, medical, schools, all of the things. And look at the last statistics, which I think are really, very striking, that for a young American now, this age when they can first afford to own their own home or get, if you like, to come to the home is 38 years old.
Wow.
Well, that has severe implications for young women, that you can't actually expect to own a home, marry, start a family before 38 or after 38 into your 40s. So all these things are really weighing. So, when we're talking about these populists, it's populists on the MAGA side, but there are Democratic populists. And we saw this, I think, in these elections. It wasn't just, that, but many of the people who had voted for Trump in the first elections, thinking and hoping that he was going to bring an answer to the question, going to bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States, was going to achieve something. And they voted for Trump, but many of them are now deserting.
Right.
But they don't have anything to go to, just as in Europe, because it's Tweedledum and Tweedledee. So they got rid of, in Britain, they got rid of the Conservative Party, which was deeply unpopular, hated even. And so they got rid of the Conservative Party and then elected not a mandate, but on a tiny basis, a Labour Party. And now they're fed up with the Labour Party because they're not providing any answer either. Structurally, it would be impossible, because you have on one hand an economy which is thriving on financialized assets, which only 10% of the population own. And then on the other hand, you have others that are just succumbing to debt and to higher prices and just cannot get out of that trap. But how do you change this economy? It would require a huge structural change to alter it. It's not easy. For 4 decades, we've pursued debt and consumption as the drivers of our economy. And now we're hoping to supplant that with AI. And of course, it's not going to work. It's not providing GDP or jobs. Look at those sort of great big empty warehouses that the AI kings are building. They're empty of people. There aren't jobs there. There were only the jobs of building, but after that, there are no jobs in it. There are just humming computers. And they say that, AI has driven up GDP by a certain percentage. This isn't, real economy. This is just figures. This is just make-believe. You can
where are the billionaires putting their money? They're not putting them into Rust Belt industries. They're putting them into these AI monstrosities, no?
They put it, yes, they are planning, American AI giants are planning $500 billion of investment into more data centers and more AI, if you like, these huge manufacturing, the managing of data. But you know, what we see, the statistic, I mean, the investigations by MIT shows that most companies, some of them, 91% of companies have started using, have seen very little benefit from it, almost no benefit from it. And AI, they concluded on their test, just doesn't work. It doesn't actually explain the environment. It doesn't interpret it. It's really just a process of, if you like, managing managing ideas within the structure, but it isn't actually creating anything at all. It's just serving up what has been said and done in the past in a way that is accessible. But it is still the past, and it isn't anything new, and it isn't offering young people a real prospect for getting out of this trap. And I just want to emphasize, I'm not getting at the United States particularly, although that's at the core of it, but the same thing is happening to Europe. And the young are getting radicalized. Look at what the great, huge protest marches. They're not covered deliberately by the press very, very much. But these were extremely angry marches and protest movements. And if you can't change the system, if you can't get your message across by protesting, and if you can't get it by changing the government from conservative to Labour, Democrat to Republican, because the system is so entrenched, completely structurally entrenched, what do? You're going to turn to violence in the end. And so this is a real problem for us.
Are the anti-establishment demonstrations in Europe, as many are in the US, anti-Zionism?
Oh yes, very much so. I mean, they actually covered it because there were there was a protest and a celebration, and the singers kept talking about death to the IDF, and that was taken up by the whole group. I mean, there's a very strong language that is coming out because of what's happened in Gaza, but more than that. But it's also, I just underline, antagonism towards Washington for what is seen by these protesters in places like the UK, but across Europe, is the inability of both Europe and Washington to do anything about the genocide. In fact, to facilitate it and to collaborate with it. So there's a great anger at the establishments in Europe and towards Washington, particularly Mr. Trump, for his close association with Netanyahu.
If you stand on a street corner in London on a soapbox, or otherwise draw attention to yourself, I don't know if there are soapboxes anymore, and say death to the IDF, or wave a Palestinian flag, will you be arrested?
You'll go to prison. Oh. You'll definitely go to prison. You'll go to prison for that, yes. And I'm sure they're going to arrest those people who were singing, and if they can, they will try. I mean, just as they arrested about, hundreds, I think 1,000 of protesters who held up placards saying that they supported Palestine and they were against genocide. And the police had to, because they say Palestinian Action is a terrorist organization, and therefore they arrested many of them. I mean, it was just a sort of huge processing plants set up by the police to arrest old ladies, clerics in the church, elderly people, retired people, all were arrested and hauled away by the police for protesting the genocide and saying that they supported Palestine action.
That can't last much longer. I mean, what is the government afraid of? This is just speech. It's not violence. It's pure speech. It's political speech. In America, theoretically, it's the highest protected speech we have.
That's the legal basis in Europe is that this is hate speech and therefore verges on a crime, is a crime. And that groups who support, the support for Palestine action, which I say, you can look at it. There are people in wheelchairs being wheeled there, elderly people with their, with their frames wandering around, people from the church, all of whom were arrested once for saying supporting Palestine, and they were put into, and they've been charged. I don't think they can imprison them all, but some are being imprisoned for what they're saying. But it's just not possible to manage it. The courts are collapsing under the pressures.
In your opinion, is Donald Trump free to stop being a zealous Zionist?
No, I don't think he is. I think he is completely a captive of the donors. But I would say, with Stockholm syndrome, I don't think he has fought that very hard. This is what, is animating the MAGA people. Charlie Kirk did push back against this. But I don't think that Trump is inclined to push back. I think he is, in a certain extent. He speaks the speak of Zionism and talks the talk of Zionism and acts in that way. And so whatever his deepest views, when he spoke to the Knesset, he virtually hinted when he was talking about Miriam Adelson and how she put Israel before America. There was no sign of criticism of that at all from Trump in that speech. So I don't think there's, first of all, the donors will not accept it. And the donors, are absolutely adamant. They are American donors as well as in Israel. Donors are absolutely adamant that America should give unqualified support to Israel. This has been the position. This is what I mean by deep architecture. That has been the position for 4 decades. They're not about to give it up. They're not about to change. It's the same with Russia. They're not going to change these deep structures of foreign policy. And they paid for them, in their view. They paid for them, and there's an ideology behind it. So we have to understand that. It's not just a simple stage. It's not just, if you like, moving towards Armageddon. It is messianic in its thinking. It goes back to the roots of messianic change that took place, and part of that messianic element that took place in the 17th century with Sabbatai Vivi and Jacob Franks did bring about a huge change, not only in Israel, but also in Europe. You have to understand that, to understand what's happening in Europe. It became messianic and became translated into ideology. First of all, with James Burnham, and then it became translated into ideology with Brzezinski, who wrote the book about
Right.
anti-morality, anti-church, that technocracy. We all have to come together as one, right and left. I mean, it was a messianic redemptionist view, if you like, of the world. So, I mean, we have been, and we've had the same things happening. The Sabbatean influence was prevalent in Europe and created some of the same effects. We had that in Europe. With the clubs and the others that also took an anti-morale, that the Messianic age meant an end of, if you like, classical Mosaic morality. And you had to go against it to undo, if you like, all of the legacy from the past. I mean, this was part of what happened in the revolutions. It was called the Hellfire Club in Britain in the 18th century.
Let me segue a bit to the Oval Office later this morning, where the president will celebrate the presence of a man who killed U.S. Marines, cut people's heads off, boasted about it, had a $10 million bounty on his head, and now is the president of Syria. How repellent a scene are we about to observe?
Well, I've been saying this for so long, but I've actually dealt with them for many years. This type of people, we call them Salafists. These are the people who take an extremely literal understanding of what happened in Medina during the time of the Prophet and what he said and was reported to have said, and they take that literally. So that if the Prophet stirred his tea clockwise, they all stir their tea clockwise. If he did something else in a different way, but it's totally literal and they feel any deviation from this is effectively heresy and that they can't stand it. Now, I've seen them for many years. We have tried to use Salafists for our own purposes, for geopolitical purpose, for our own political purposes. And I've said, and I remember saying this to a head of an intelligence service, I said, every time I've seen them, people saying, oh, we use the Salafists, and the head of a European intelligence service, oh, we find them quite useful. And I said, well, you will find in the end that they have used you rather than you using them. That is the way in which they function. And that is what is happening. They are using it. If you think that they have given up the ideas and the thinking of Salafism, it's ingrained. I mean, they believe it in a deeply religious way. But they are prepared to, if you like, they are prepared to use Shyamalan politics. Oh, yes, we can be the White House fighting, we get the money. They want the sanctions lifted. They want the support from the West. They want the investment to rebuild their structures. They want the money. So they will present the face that is necessary to achieve their ends, using them because we're going to pursue our objectives of making Israel safe and a beacon for the future, and that they will come and be forever friends of Israel.
Well, let me go back to Europe before we conclude our happy time together. Do the principal Chancellor Merz, Mrs. von der Leyen, do they support the theft of Russian state assets in European banks?
Yes, they're desperate. Yes, they do, because they're desperate. Ukraine is will be effectively broke, and they're desperate to keep Ukraine afloat with money. And they look at the budgets, and many states are saying, because if they issue a bond on its own to finance this, like a treasury bill, if you like, issued by Europe, they don't exist. And each state has to take the sort of sovereign responsibility for those bonds and stand for the losses and repay the losses if, for example, Ukraine falls and Zelensky's signature on the loan agreement is no longer legal. And so the only way they can manage this, because a number of European states have said, no, we're not going to put any more money into Ukraine because it's at the expense of the basic services that we're trying to provide for our own people. Schools and health and all of these things are being cut to provide this money. So they've said no. So the European Union, or at least some parts of it, I mean, the Commission and Germany, particularly, are saying, well, let's just take the Russian frozen assets, let's steal them and use them, and we'll give it as a loan to Ukraine, but we will never expect to be repaid it. But then Belgium is going to be massively hit by law claims, legal claims against Belgium for taking this action. These were on deposit with a firm in Belgium called Euroclear, and legal action can be taken against it in Belgium, or it may be taken against Euroclear overseas, and Belgium would stand to bear the cost of this. A lot of money we're talking about.
What a mess. Alastair, thank you. Thank you for your, as always, deep and thoughtful analysis. I know you'll be traveling soon, but we'll look forward to seeing you next week. All the best, my friend, and safe travels.
Thank you very much indeed. See you next week.
Of course. Thank you. And coming up later today at 10 o'clock this morning, Ray McGovern. At 11:30 this morning, Larry Johnson. At 1:05 this afternoon from Tehran, our friend, Professor Mohammad Marandi, Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.